So today we're going to be talking about, identity, access, and security. I'm sure, I've actually said something close to these at some point when I explained that your identity in the cloud is your username and password. That is one of the identity that we use in authenticating. So there are some terms I will be talking about here, which most of us might not be used to. So when I say something like you want to sign in into an application, you want to log in into an application, that's the common term. We all understand that, yes, when you want to sign in, you need to put in your credentials, maybe your username and password. But when we talk about it in Azure, we are not going to be saying signing in or logging in. Most times I will refer to it as authenticating. So when you hear me talking about authenticating or authentication, please know I'm talking about you signing in. Then there will be another term, which is authorization. So when you hear me talk about authorization, that means I'm talking about permission. So this is it. I gave an example. I don't know if it's this class, but let's say you work with Jumia. As a staff, you will have more access to the Jumia app in the sense that you are able to see the finances depending on the department where you are, depending on the permission that you have been given on that application. You are going to be able to see a whole lot of things as against being a customer. As a customer, you will only have access to your own dashboard where you can see your orders, where you can see how much you spend, what you've ordered for in the past, your delivery address, and maybe your payment method. But for someone working with Jumia on the back end, is going to see, how much Jumia is making on that particular application each day, or for a particular day, how many customers are there, which you won't be able to see because the permission that has been assigned to you doesn't allow you or doesn't give you that, access to be able to see some critical aspect of, that application. So you are not able to see some statistics. You are not able to access, some particular web page, and that's what we call authorization. You are only able to see what you have been authorized to see. You have been only able to see what you have been permitted to see. Being a customer, you only have permissions to access your own dashboard. And that's what we call authorization. So authorization deals with permissions. Then when we talk about, so sometimes I might say auth. So I'm still talking about authorization. That is auth and Z. Then when you hear something like authentication, also can be auth N. So authentication, which means you signing in, you logging in. So that's what we'll be talking about when we talk about access. Then when we talk about identity, we're talking about, the object that is actually authenticating into a particular web application or into the portal. So an object being you with your username and password, and we can have some other, identity objects that we'll also discuss. So if at any point in time you have any question, please do let me know. So also we'll talk about some security tools in Azure, that makes your environment secure. Microsoft cannot do it alone. So you also need to make sure, all these tools, all these services that Azure, is giving you to secure environment, you are also implementing it. Or else, if you get if your environment gets compromised, you will not blame Azure for it because there are tools and services that you can actually implement. And we have what we call, the security recommendation, which is actually taken from the security center to tell you this is how you can actually secure your environment. So we'll be looking at all those tools and services as we go on. So let's start by. So this is what we'll be talking about. We'll talk about the identity part of Azure AD, which is before we used to call it Azure AD, but now it's called Entra ID. They just renamed it. So we look at Entra ID domain services also. Like I do say, do not worry yourself about all these technical terms. You will still get there. So then we'll talk about single sign-on, which means that let's say you have multiple applications that you have designed in your environment. So if let's say we have Facebook, Twitter, then Instagram and the likes, then all this application is actually owned by one organization. That means there is no need for us to sign in into Facebook, then create another email address or start signing in into Instagram, independently, because all this application is owned by just one organization. When I sign in into one, automatically I should be signing into all, and that's what we call single sign-on. So when you sign in into one of the application, it will give you access to sign in into all other applications. It doesn't work with Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I just gave that as an example, but the idea is if you have multiple application in your organization, because you have just one identity, which is your username and password, when you sign in into one of these application, if you click on the link of one other application of another application, automatically you should be signed in into the other application without the need for you to start putting in your username and password again. Then we'll look at multi-factor authentication, which is something we are used to now. When you try to sign in into an application or into a website and it tells you, yes, we know you know the password and your email address, but we have sent an email to you. Please, can you put in the code here? Or even on your phone, or you need to configure maybe an authentication app where you can get the code. Or you are trying to send money to Nigeria and GTB is saying, I don't trust you. You want to send more than 120,000. No. Now you need to use your token. So it generated code for you. So that's what we call two-factor. So what it's trying to do is trying to confirm if you are the real owner of that identity. So then the next one is the passwordless. The passwordless talks about, I don't want to have a password to sign in into the application. So I would rather just, put in maybe my email, then a code should be sent to my email. That code is what I will use, to gain access to that application. Hold on, please. Please give me a minute. Somebody is asking for the code. Why is it supposed to ask for a code? Please give me a minute. I need to check the code for this meeting. I even need a code. A minute, please. Sorry. Okay. All right. So that's for the passwordless. Like I said, you do not want to use password anytime you are trying to sign into the application, or anytime you are trying to authenticate into the application. So you want to make sure that you are only being verified via maybe your email address or your phone number. So when you put in your email address, because you have not set any password, a token will be sent to you. When I say a token, some numbers will be sent to you. It might not be numbers, it might be a combination of numbers and characters. And you are being instructed to now put in that particular token into the application. Then when you have that token in there, you will be allowed to sign into the application. That means you are trying to sign in without a password. That's what we call passwordless authentication. Then we'll describe what we call external identity and guest in Azure. You guys are actually guests to this my meeting. You are guests to this my organization, and that's why you will notice that when we finish this meeting, when everybody logs out, you guys will not have access to the meeting until I allow you to come into the meeting again. So the recording, you will not have access to it. So you will not have access to the meeting again because you guys are guests. So, but the best way to describe this is, let's say I set up a company in Nigeria, and I'm actually an Arab man. So I'm thinking there's no point for me investing in a whole lot of things. I want to set up a business, but I do not want to, purchase a building to run my business, even when I need a building, to serve as my office in Nigeria. Then I'm looking at the logistics for my staff wherever they are staying. I want to be able to pick them up, with the staff boss, take them to office, then from the office take them back to their respective home. Then again, we want some caterers to always come in every day, to give maybe a lunch to our staff. So what I would do is I will talk to some other guys in Nigeria to say, yes, you guys owns this building. We want to rent this building for a while. However, we do not want to get involved in the management or the maintenance of the building. You guys are going to have an office or a space within that office. So you guys will sit in there. If anybody has any complaint in our organization, they can come to you guys. So solely, you guys are the one in charge of, managing the building. Then I'll talk to the cab guys to say the logistics is actually on you. You guys will also be, we'll give you a space, an office in our, a space in our office. You guys can sit there. If anybody has any issue regarding logistics, they can walk in. So those guys will serve as if they are staff in that organization, even when they are third parties. So that's the same thing in Azure. Let's say we want to build an application in Azure, then we'll invite developers from another organization to say, you guys should join our organization for now as a guest. We'll invite you to our organization as a guest. You have username and password. You will be able to authenticate into our organization portal. However, it will be for this specific period. And when you are done, we can actually now take your username and password out of our organization. So when you invite someone or when you invite an organization to collaborate with you, on maybe building an application or any other thing in your organization in Azure, we call it, guest. And these users that are invited to that particular organization will be termed as external identities because they were not created in the organization. They don't belong to the organization. They were only invited to that organization. Then we'll talk about conditional access. So when you hear conditional access, so I'm sure everyone will have witnessed this. Most applications, specifically maybe applications in the UK, let's even take Revolut as an example. If you try to, open up Revolut account from Nigeria, using a Nigerian IP, you might get that notification to say this application doesn't work in this region, or it might not be even Revolut, it might be some other application or some other website. When you visit it, you will get that notification to say this website doesn't work in this region. So the technology behind, because when you build a website, it's not as if you go there, to start selecting where the website should work. So you build the website, then you need to start applying some policies, some settings to say this region, please no. This region, no. This region, yes. Then that's technology behind you restricting, users from a particular location or from a particular IP address or any other, attribute you want to put in place. It's called that conditional access. So you are putting a condition to say, if users are trying to access this application from this location, please do not allow. So the technology in Azure behind that particular thing is called conditional access. So we'll talk about it. Then RBAC is, as you can see here, role-based access control, which when we talk about authorization, which I said is related to permissions. So we use what we call the RBAC to assign roles in Azure. So these roles are used to, give permissions to users or to identity to say this is what you can access, this is what you cannot access. Then we'll talk about zero trust. So zero trust in Azure, or let's say the principle of zero trust, is to say, regardless of the person, even if he's a top manager, I don't care. We don't trust anyone because any account can be compromised at any time. You must always verify, we will make sure that every access is fully authenticated and fully authorized. And that's the meaning of zero trust. So let's take, a big organization as an example. Because I'm the managing director, I feel like anytime I want to sign in into this our portal, you should not ask me for multi-factor authentication. Once I put in my username and password, you should just sign me in, or let's say because I'm MD, if I take this my system to Nigeria, I should still be allowed to sign in, even because I'm the owner of the organization. No, we are saying yes, even when we want to allow you, we need to verify that this is you. We don't care what position you hold in the organization. You must always authenticate. You must always verify that this is you. So we don't give, that permission to some part of the management to say yes because you you hold, a very big position in the organization, we should allow allow this set of people to authenticate, or to not use multi-factor authentication, or don't put them on conditional access. No, zero trust is regardless of the person, regardless of the identity, everybody must fully authenticate. Then we'll look at, defense in depth model, which talks about every, at every, how can I put this? At every layer of authentication, we want to make sure there is a defense. So the defense, let me take this as an example. A virtual machine, when you create a virtual machine, before you can log into the Azure environment, you need to put your username and password. That's the first defense layer. Then when you now access your virtual machine, when you want to access your virtual machine via your RDP, or when you want to remote into your virtual machine, I think I showed you guys how to remote into the people that were present in the second class or third class or something. When you want to access that your virtual machine, you still need to put username and password. Let's even take it out from, the way I'm explaining now. In your home, in our homes now, before you can enter, the building, maybe there is a gate, you need to use your fob. That's the first level of defense. Then when you come in, before you can access the main building, you still need to open up a door. That's the second layer of defense. Then when you get to your flat again, you need to, use your key to open up. That's the third layer. Then before you can enter your room also, maybe there is another key, there is another lock, you still need to, use your key to open up. Then let's say you want to access your drawer, and where you have kept some valuable things, you need to still put a key and open it up. So each layer, there is actually a defense there. So that's what we call the defense in depth model. So for every layer, you want to make sure, so we won't say because the main entrance is locked, we can leave the other, doors unlocked. So if anyone get access, to the main door, then that means it will be able to access the other layers. And that's just the typical example. Then we'll talk about Microsoft Defender for cloud. This is just going to be giving you, security recommendations. This is a tool that gives you that security recommendation to say, this is what you need to do. This is how you can improve the security. So let's look at all these one after the other. Any question? Anything that you feel like I should explain again?
All right. Hello.
Olayinka? Okay, I'm with you.
Yes, good evening. I want you to touch the R back or reback or something a little bit more.
Yeah, we'll get there. When I start looking at the slides now. But when we talk about RBAC, it's just the roles that are assigned to users to allow them to, gain access to some specific resources. So when we talk about RBAC, we talk about authorization. We are saying we want to authorize you to access. So every resource you create in Azure, you know, you need permissions. You need to assign permission to that resource or to users before they can access that particular resource. That's why even if both of us, work in the same organization, but we don't work in the same department, sometimes you can have permissions to access more resources than I do. And that technology or behind, assigning permissions to users to be able to access, some specific resources is called the RBAC. So we'll look more into it. So
Okay, brilliant. I get it now.
yeah. So we'll talk about Entra ID, and this is the identity part of Azure. So like I said, we used to call it Azure AD, which is Azure Active Directory. But now it has been changed to Microsoft Entra ID. So Microsoft Entra Identity. So this is where users are being created. This is where groups are being created. This is where we assign, RBAC. This is where, so there are a lot of, services under this particular, Entra ID. But when you hear anything about Entra ID, this is more of, the identity and the access management service in Azure. It controls anything related to users. When we talk about identity, we are talking about the user, we are talking about application. So when we talk about roles, we talk about the permissions. So we control everything from the Entra ID side, which is the identity service management service of Azure. So the Microsoft Entra ID, is this cloud-based identity and access management. As you can see, it controls what we call the authentication. Like I said, when we talk about signing in, we are talking about authentication. So when employee try to access a particular resource, a virtual machine is a resource. Like I said, each service you have in Azure, each service has its own resource. Or we can say each service, is tantamount or equivalent to a resource. So when we say we want to create a virtual machine, even when a virtual machine is a technology, or a service in Azure, so we will say a virtual machine is actually a resource, which provides this service. So when we talk about resources, so we are talking about all those services that we have in Azure that we can actually use, maybe to perform some operations within our organizations. So before you can access any resource, you need to have an identity. And this identity may be your username and password. And this identity will be used in authenticating you into that particular resource. But before you even get to the level of authenticating, it is only people that have access to that particular resource will even be able to authenticate. So before you can even authenticate into a resource, you need to, have, you need to be authorized. You need to be assigned a permission, like Inka has asked. You need to have an RBAC role assigned to you before you can actually, access a resource, not to even talk of you authenticating. Then, like I said, I talked about the single sign-on, where I said when an organization have multiple applications, there is no point when a user signing into one application and he needs to sign into another application. So when you sign into one application, if you click on, I'm sure some people here might have seen that works. If you click on another link, which is another application, the user will be signing directly to the other application or to the next application. So there is no point you signing into this one, then you need to sign in the same identity. So, and all this username and password, is the same in all those applications. So there is no point. So we want it anytime you try to access another application within that particular organization, you should be logged in automatically, and that's what the single management. So under the Entra ID, we'll talk about the application management. But for any application that we use in Azure, this is where we'll create a replica of it. Or so when we say a replica, or let's say this is where we create how can I put this?
Duplicate.
Yeah, so something like that. It's not a duplicate though, but because your main application needs to talk to, before you can authenticate into your main application, which sits on a domain, there should be some connection between that your resource, that your main application and Azure. And the connection is that application that we create in Azure. So we call it service connection sometimes, but you will get to know, all these jargons I'm saying, but you get to see, in the real sense when we start looking at the administrator part of these things. So, but for when we design applications, for us to integrate that identity, that authentication part of Microsoft into that application. So we need an application that connects our identity, our username and password, that we have created, and our main application. So just when we create application, you will see how we create application within Azure. It's not that all those websites, but there is something that needs to link Azure and your website together. And those are just the applications in Azure. Then we'll talk about the B2B, which is the business to business, which I will explain when we talk about the guest user and the external identity. So we call it, I was saying I want to invest in, in Nigeria, but I do not want to build, I do not want to have a building. I just want to, get a building that can be leased out for me, or I want to rent a building for me to perform, this, or I want to get logistic company coming with their own boss and the likes, but they will be, part of the organization indirectly. So when we try to work with another business, so that's what we call business to business, B2B. There's another one we call B2C, which I think we'll touch base on it also. That's business to consumer. So the business to consumer, the way that one works is we are only talking to consumers, which are, people accessing our site. So I'm sure you guys will have noticed it. When you try to sign in into some applications, they will tell you can sign in with your Facebook, you can sign in with Google. So instead of you creating password and username again on that application, you can click on Google. It will take you back to, if you click on sign in with Google, it will take you back to Google. Then you can put your, email address and username for that Google account that you own. Then it will redirect you back to the application and it will just sign you in, So there is a technology called, business to consumer, Azure B2C. Then device management, when we started talking about this course, I said, cloud computing now, we've moved away from the traditional IT way where we own an IT office, we put in servers and the likes. But that server, in that IT office, it does a lot more than, just having files and folder on it or application. We call something the identity, which we use that particular server to control, the other devices that are actually in that organization. We call it Active Directory that time. So that is where your username and password will be created. That's where your device will be created. So when you are sacked from that organization, the IT person will just change the username and password or the password of that person. Then when you come into the office, you try to sign in into that desktop. It will tell you your username and password does not correspond. Then you come to IT. IT, I cannot sign in. IT will say, go and meet the HR. So the HR will now explain to you that right, we've changed it. you are no more, in the organization or something like that. So
And no more our staff.
yes, and that's it. So that means that server is controlling the other devices, and that's why any rule we set or policy that we set on that server will be sent out to all the devices, regardless of the device where you want to sign into. So we have the same thing in Azure. Despite the fact that is in the cloud, we can connect our physical machine or the virtual machine to that Microsoft identity and manage it from there. And that's why when you install, for us that have installed Office 365, if you try to sign in for the first time, it will ask you, do you want your organization to manage your device, or you want to sign into this application only? So that's what we call the device management. Then this is the domain services I just explained, the same thing that we have on on-premises, where we controls what's going on. We have the domain, as you can see, it syncs users, groups, passwords. So we change the password and sync it back to those devices. And regardless of the device you are trying to sign in, there is more to it. But for now, just take this as the example. I do not want to bore you with a lot of technical jargons, but that's just the main thing. Then we talked about the authentication and authorization, which I explained that when you sign in, we talk about authentication. But when you want to access a particular thing on that web application, where I gave an example of Jumia, then we'll say authorization is related to permissions, related to access, and that's what you can see here. Go back, Mike. So that's what you can see here. So authentication identifies the person, but authorization, it gives the person, access. It defines what you can actually access. So multi-factor authentication, we talked about this also. Yes, we know you have your username and password. What if your account has been compromised? So I will need you to still use, that token that has been sent to you, or to say, yes, you are the owner of this, of this particular identity. We do not just want to allow you just because you have put in your username and password. Then this is the B2B that I talked about, business to business. When you work with guests, I used to work with a company then, and every afternoon they give us lunch, but the company is not, we do not have chef. However, the company has actually invited another company to cater for that particular stuff. So that company, even when we have an application where you can order what you want, for the week, so that means the other company, they have access to that application also, which sits in our organization. That means they also have access. So that means two businesses, or two organizations are actually doing business together. So the company invited them to the company to say, we do not want to bother ourselves recruiting chefs, recruiting, people that works in the kitchen. We rather outsource it, but we want you to be part of the organization so that when our staff are ordering for, their food, you can also see it on your end. So that's what we call business to business. So we invite business to collaborate with another business. So when you hear about guest user, Azure B2B, and this is it. Then this is the B2C I talked about. You understand how it works, it's easy. But we in the front end, when you just sign in into an organization, or when you access one application, and you try to access the application, tell you, you can, instead of you creating your password, you can sign in with Gmail, sign in with Google. I think Real Madrid is one organization that uses this technology a lot. This part where you try to log into if I click on this will take me to Google. I'll just put in my Google, email. I click on it, and automatically I will be signed into the application. So this particular technology behind this signing with Google, signing with Apple is called, the Azure B2C. It's a very good, technology if you want to know about it. Then we talked about the conditional access, where I explained that, the owner of the application want to restrict how users are accessing that particular application. It might be based on location, to say anyone from Africa, we do not want them to access this application, or anyone on this particular IP address. Let's say, yes, our company is in the UK. Because of data protection, anytime you travel to, Nigeria, we do not want you to work from there. So if you pretend as if you are still in the UK and you take your system home, then you won't be able to access, because we'll say this location, you are not allowed to access this application from here. So it might be device based, to say when you are on Android 8.0 or you are on Android, we do not want Android users to access this application, only iPhone users, or we can create users or group if this is done. Maybe this is an internal one. It is not open to the public. Maybe a private, application which is meant for organization only. And we say junior staff should not be allowed to access this application. Then we'll put them into a group, and we'll select that group when we set up the conditional access. So regardless of how you try to, you will still not be able to access, or we can take off some particular users to say this person is not going to access. So, or we can use risk detection. If we feel like, we'll set up the policy to say, if you feel like the account is compromised, you should not allow the account, to be used to access this particular application. So conditional access is used to make, critical decisions based on policies that we set in there. Then we talked about the outback, which is the role-based access control, which gives you um, permissions, to access a particular resource based on the roles or the scope that has been assigned to you. So zero trust, I talked about the zero trust, um, where we want everyone to fully authenticate and verify themselves, regardless of who you are, regardless of what identity, what level you are. So that's what's called zero trust. Anyone, everybody must authenticate, everybody must verify their. We are not, saying some people are, should be given some, some, maybe some level of security should be taken off them because they are senior staff or something. No, we are saying Azure gives you that benefit to set everyone to authenticate on zero trust. Defense in depth, like I said, we have layers, and for every layer, we'll make sure that there is a security, there is a barrier, So regardless of the layer you are accessing from, so I explained the fact that if you are in a building, before you can access the building, access your room, access your flat, every layer, when you come into that building, there is a security, in place to make sure you do not just get to the data layer without, passing through all this. So we'll still talk about security in each of these layers, physical security, identity security, where we talk about the authentication, the multi-factor authentication and the perimeter, the network, where we'll be talking about the network security group that I explained day before yesterday. When you set up or create a network, we also secure our network. We do not, so when you can also secure a network by saying, if you are trying to access from this IP, you should not be able to access from this IP. If you are trying to access from this particular, yes, this particular port, we should not be allowed to, go into this port or something. So we can do that. We can set up that the compute, which is the system, the computer, the virtual machine, we want to set up security on it also. The application itself, we want to use conditional access to say this application, if you are from this location, you should not be able. So if you are able to, go through all these layers of security, then you still get to this place and you are still able to, have access. Then at that time, then you should have access to the data. So we should not just allow you to say it is only when you get to the application, or if you have passed through this physical security, then when you come into the office, let's say you go into your office today, you bring in your laptop. It doesn't mean because you are in the office, we should not ask you to authenticate to your computer. We still need you to authenticate. We still want to make sure that everything is still secured, even when you are in the office. You are not accessing from outside. But when you come into the office, you still need to authenticate. We still need to secure our network. We still need to secure our application before you get access to the data. And that's what you can see here. Then this is the Microsoft Defender for Cloud. I'm sure some of us might have seen Microsoft Defender on our system. So that Microsoft Defender, what it does is it scans for virus and the likes. And here, this is almost the same thing this does, but this is actually a monitoring service. It monitors what's going on in your organization, then it gives you that recommendation to say, these are some of the things you can do to protect your organization. It detects, let's say somebody is trying to compromise one of the accounts. So in compromisation, we can say, yes, somebody have got hold of your username and password and is trying to authenticate. Then we'll say, oh, this person is trying to authenticate, but it doesn't have access to the multi-factor authentication, maybe to the email address of the person. Then it keeps trying, it keeps guessing. So we'll say this account has been compromised. So this will give you, that recommendation to say, this particular person, please, you can take him off, you can set this IP, you can change his location. So there are a lot of things, you'll see the secure score, you'll see everything, all the recommendations from here. All right. I think that brings us to the end of the class. Any question? Even if you don't have one, I think we should have k.ms. Okay, I've opened this before. Yeah. So we should. So we discussed this. I'm just going to see if we have been following. So we talked about storage yesterday, then we talked about compute. Okay, I think we should be able to, talk about these three. So the first one is knowledge check for this. Then we should be able to answer the question. So, which Azure Virtual Machine feature staggers updates across VM based on update domain and false domain? Did we even talk about update around and false domain? Did we? I think we skipped this. I think we skipped it. Did we?
Okay. I think it should be availability set, right?
Yeah, it's availability set, but I think, did we talk about update domain and false domain? Did I mention it in the class?
I was not in that class yesterday.
Okay, I think it was not yesterday. Okay, for false domain, this is a question that did not allow me to travel to Lindaland 2 years ago. Yes, they asked me this question it was final final interview, with one of these companies. I've forgotten the name of this company. And this was the question they asked me, and the lady said, with all my technical, ability, she expects me to know this fundamental question. So, update domain, please. That's what I keep saying. You guys need to take everything serious. So, update domain, fourth domain. So this is related to this terms is related to the data center. So when we have in our data center, we have multiple servers, but these servers are actually in different racks. So on one rack, we can have like 5 servers. So that means those servers, will presume that those servers will be sharing the same, PowerPoint, like plugged on the same PowerPoint. If I take off that PowerPoint, all those servers should go off. And that is what we call the fourth domain. That means they share the same PowerPoint. But we have servers that, regardless of the rack they are, those servers are servers that will restart together. When we do an update, we want to restart them together at the same time. And that's what we call the update domain. So when you have set of servers, that you restart together, based on updates, those are called, update domains. And for fourth domain, those are servers, or workloads that share the same PowerPoint. So here, across availability sets, okay, so that should be fine. Which Azure service allows users, to use a cloud-hosted version of Windows from any location and connect from them from modern browsers. So it allows you to use a version of Windows operating system from any location and connect from them from modern browsers. You guys are not talking, it's only Shola.
Azure Virtual Desktop.
Shola, virtual desktop only allows you to use applications.
Yeah, but it says from modern browsers, because for virtual machine, it will be a remote desktop connector. And then for container, of course, that's like Docker. I'm not sure you can do it from browsers.
Okay, that's it. That's fine. So that's it. Then the next one, we'll talk about the storage account. Then which tools automatically keep files between on-premises Windows servers and Azure cloud environment updated? We talked about this yesterday. Anyone? Okay, you wanted to write. Don't just unmute your mic. Talk.
Yeah, I said the first one.
Azure File Sync.
Yeah, good. So what I talked about the storage explorer, that storage explorer is just like, the file explorer on your system, where it gives you access to access your files and folders that are in Azure, just like how you see it on, your system. And the easy copy is just, a command line interface for managing those files. So which storage redundancy options provide the highest degree of durability with 16 nines of durabilities? GeoZone. So which Azure services support big data analysis as well as handling tests and binary types? Test. Which services of storage accounts is used for managing unstructured data like text, images, videos? I talked about it yesterday.
Azure Blob.
Azure Blobs. Thank you. Yeah. So the last one for today, we'll talk about the identity itself, which Entra Microsoft Entra 2 can vary the credentials needed to log in based on signal, such as where the user is located.
Conditional access.
Conditional access.
Thank you, guy. Which security model assume the worst case security scenario and protect resources accordingly?
I don't trust you. Zero trust.
Zero trust. Rules that use role-based access control. What are the actual permissions? The roles are row 1, read. Row 2, write. Row 2, read and write. All right. So you guys, at least we're getting there. If you have any question at any point in time, like I said, we are still going to try to do. I will find a time that works for everyone. Even when we are going to be finishing up, the second module is completed now. The third module, we do not really have much in there. Because we'll only be talking about the management tools, you understand, and we should be done with that by Sunday, this next Sunday that is coming. So the upper weekend, maybe we'll set up, a class just for us to have a summary of everything, because most of us joined not from the beginning, you understand. So let's go back to the initial. Let's go back to the cloud computing part and explain and talk about some of the labs that we should have done, because that lab, I'm going to post the lab that you need to do, and that's why I created that Slack environment. If you have not joined the Slack environment, now I will want everyone to post their screenshots. It must not be today, but before the next weekend, before the next class, that shows all the labs you've done. Maybe you might need to go back and do the lab again. Then you do a screenshot, you put it there. That's the only way I can confirm, you guys are practicing it. I'm so sorry if it's going to be tedious, but we need to. That sounds right? All right. I'd like to thank everyone. You guys have been so wonderful. Okay, so I think this is where we end it, except if anyone has any question. All right. Bye, everyone.